Here we are on the bottom of Nun Amud Aleph. This is a parak that begins with a discussion about minhagim. Minhagim is a very complicated discussion in terms of what is the binding force of minhagim. Although not mentioned in the Gemara, probably one of the most interesting and to some people irritating minhagim is when it comes to kitnios. Kitnios is not really discussed fully in the Gemara, but it's something which there's been a lot of discussion now. Can people in Israel, there's become a bit of a trend, people who are coming from Ashkenazi places try to say, well, we don't need a hold of kitnios anymore, we're able to not, and whatever. It's a discussion, and a lot of the sources are born out of this parak over here. So let's begin. Makom shenagu lasos malacha me'arve Pesachim ad chatzos. In a place where people had the custom to work Erev Pesach until midday, Osin, you're allowed to work. Makom shenagu shelo lasos. There's a place where the custom was not to perform work at that time, not to perform work all day long on Erev Pesach. Ein Osin, you're not allowed to do work. So if you live in a place where they have a minhag, you have to stick to the minhag of makom. You have to recognize that nowadays we don't really have that. We don't really have that. And some people see this as a beautiful thing. It's also a little complicated. My kids were asking me the other night, my family name allegedly comes, there's a tiny little city in Germany called Matzen, something like that, and our family comes from there. There's a yearly golf tournament if anyone wants to go, but that's all it's known for. Bottom line is our family probably comes from there. My kids always bug me because they want to keep 3 hours between meat and milk. They're like, 3 hour Abba, aren't we yakis? And the reality is anyone who moved from back in the day, my family may have come from Germany in 1700, but in 1800 they moved to Hungary, Czechoslovakia, whatever it was, and what do you do when you move? You change your minhag. You adopt the minhag of the place, right? So, nowadays you come to America, I come from Germany, I hold on to those things. But back in the day, wherever you came, you adopted the minhag of the place. That's what it was. Sephardim went to Ashkenazi, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, you changed the minhagim. So, we're talking about a person over here who, the first line of the Mishnah is, you go to a new place, you keep the minhag, right? Okay, and then, how holech makam she'osin, lemakam she'nosin. Let's say you're traveling. We're not talking about the Matzen family traveling to Hungary and staying there. We're talking about people visiting for Pesach. They go to a new place, okay? They go from a place where they would do work on before midday to a place they didn't do. Or they'd go from a place where they did not work to a place that they did work. You'd impose the stringencies of the place which you came from, or the stringencies of the place which you have gone. So, for example, if you go from a place where they weren't doing work, then don't do work. If you're going to a place where they don't do work, don't do work. In other words, you're always going to take the more stringent approach wherever you go. However, the next line of the Mishnah actually seems to contradict this. At the top of Nun Amud Beis, don't be different than the local people because of conflict. So this line actually seems to imply that if everyone's working, you shouldn't be the guy, I'm not working today. It sounds a little contradictory, and the Gemara is going to address that. Yeah? Fine. Next halacha, so very quickly we have a halacha when it comes to Shvius during the 7th year. You're allowed to bring in food from the fields for your own domestic animals, the animals in your house. However, when the food in the fields runs out, when the wild animals, when the deer and everything has no more food out there, then you have to get rid of the food that you stored in your house for your own animals. That's called beer. So let's say you go from you take fruit from Shvius, makam shekalu makam shelo. You take it from a place where the food has depleted to a place where you'd have to do beer. That place you have to get rid of it to a place where they have plenty food. Or you took it from a place where they had plenty of fruits and food and whatever to a place where they don't. Chayv levair. In either case, you have to remove the food because, again, we go with the stringency whichever place you came from. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, tseva have lecha af ata. Go out and bring for yourself. And the Gemara is going to explain what exactly Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Okay, ask the Gemara. My area Arve Pesachim. Why does the Tana talk about not doing work on Erev Pesach? Afilu Arve Shabbos Arve Yom Tov Nami. Isn't there also a halacha? You're not supposed to do work after midday on Erev Shabbos and after midday on Yom Tov. We'll talk about the parameters of this shortly. It's a Tana. It's on the Brisa. Ha'osa malacha b'Arve Shabbos Yom Tov. A person does work on Erev Shabbos or Erev Yom Tov from the time of Mincha and on. Now there are 2 times of Mincha, and there's a big machlokas poskim. Is it the first time of Mincha or the second time of Mincha? Okay, big ramification. You look in the maizmanim.com, you'll see Mincha Tana, Mincha Gdola. Which one is referring to with big ramifications? Is it this time is it like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock? Is it like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, right, or 5 o'clock? So many posts can say you're relying on the later time. Okay, so anyone who does work from the later mincha time, you do not see any blessing. So the Gemara is asking why, when the Tana of the Mishnah is talking about not going from a place where they didn't do work, why are you talking about Erev Pesach? There's a general not doing work on Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov from mincha on. So the Gemara gives different answers. Hasam, there by Shabbos min mincha l'malad aser, samach l'mincha lo. In the case of Shabbos and Yom Tov, it's aser from mincha and onward. That's when it's aser. But earlier it's allowed. Hacham, when it comes to Erev Pesach, mechatzos, it's aser from midday and on. Inami, alternatively, hasam simin brachu de lo chazi. There the Brisa said you don't see any blessing in what you did. But it didn't say it's forbidden. It just said, not a good idea. You won't see any success in what you do. 50b2. We don't excommunicate the person. In other words, it's not like usher. It's just that it's not a good idea. Here on Erev Pesach, it is completely usher to do work from Chatzos and on. So let's just talk very briefly. We don't have time to go into all the halachos, but it is important. Halacha people don't know. Erev Pesach, it is kind of like Chol Hamoed. It's Chol Hamoed in the sense that there are many things that are prohibited. You're not allowed to get a haircut from Chatzos and on, meaning all your hair cutting should be done before that. All your, you should do your nail cutting before that. You should, anything then, now fine, those are all things that should be done, that need to be done. Usher, it's usher to do those things after Chatzos. There is discussion about having a non-Jew do so. So if your barber, or whatever, someone cut your nails is non-Jewish, then you are allowed to do so even after Chatzos. You could, but things which are needed for the Yom Tiv, meaning any food preparation, things of that nature, you would be allowed to do after Chatzos on Erev Pesach. Okay, so that's the distinction over here. So it's basically, you think of the parameters of Chol Hamoed, but you certainly shouldn't be doing like your work on past Chatzos on Erev Pesach, and even other things don't even work, but you could argue, hey, this is for Yom Tov, I want to shave, I want to get a haircut for Yom Tov. After Chatzos, it is usher to do so. It has to be done before. Again, asking a non-Jew, there is what to rely upon to do so. Important halacha to know. Okay, Gufa. Let's go back to Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov. Also not so well known. Also malacha Erev Shabbos, Erev Yom Tovim, min hamichol lamala from mincha and on. Uvumatzei Shabbos and after Shabbos. Uvumatzei Yom Tov, uvumatzei Yom Kippurim, and after Yom Tov and after Yom Kippur. Uvechol makom sheyesham ninun avera. Anytime where there is a trace of avera, lasuya tanas tzibor, even to include a public fasting. I'm going to qualify all these things in a moment. Ein haro osim lebracha laolam. You do not get any bracha. Okay, so Erev Shabbos, Erev Yom Tov, after Shabbos, after Yom Tov. So let's define each one. Erev Shabbos, Erev Yom Tov, the halacha is that from the later mincha, 9.5 hours and on, you shouldn't be doing full-fledged work. You are allowed to do things which are needed to get ready for Shabbos. This is a few qualifications. You're allowed to do things ready for Shabbos. The things which are not relevant to Shabbos from 9.5 hours and on, you should not be doing. Anything that's going to be involved work should not be done. Small work can be done. You can shoot an email. You can do things like that. You shouldn't be mowing your lawn from 9.5 hours and on Erev Shabbos. You could be washing dishes, cleaning your house lightly for Erev Shabbos, but to do involved work from 9.5 hours and on is brought down that it's asur. It's mamash asur. Okay, so those are some things to keep in mind. The poskim do distinguish between someone who is self-employed as opposed to working for someone else. If you're self-employed, that's when this is relevant to. If you work for someone else, you do not have to stop. If your job demands that you work until 25 minutes before Shabbos, you'd be allowed to. So if you're self-employed, you really need to stop your work, any full-fledged work. A full-fledged work after 9.5 hours at the later mincha time on Erev Shabbos. That's the Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov. Okay, when it comes to Matzei Shabbos and Matzei Yom Tov, what they're referring to is before making Havdalah. Once you make Havdalah, you're allowed to do things. There is a minhag. It's not so well practiced. Maybe some, that women don't do any malacha Matzei Shabbos. You don't hear this? There's such a minhag. Never seen it done. Yeah, okay, it's a beautiful minhag. But haven't seen it done. Some limited to sewing. That's more of a Kabbalistic reason. But the bottom line is, what we're really talking about is before making Havdalah. Once you make Havdalah, even Baruch HaMavdim and Kodesh L'chol, you're allowed to do malacha. That's what it's referring to. And when it comes to Tanis Tzibor, there's Rosh Chodesh. That's another minhag that women don't do any malacha on Rosh Chodesh. Again, very practically, very hard to put into practice, but that's more ancient minhag. And Tanis Tzibor means different opinions, but some say during the time, if there was a communal prayer during Tanis Tzibor, to do work during that time would be inappropriate. Okay, but not during the entire fast. You're allowed to work on a fast day, even though one could have argued, hey, you really should be focused. But the bottom line is, what most poskim understand is that if there was a communal, which nowadays doesn't really apply because we have mincha, minyan factories. So on a Tanis Tzibor on a fast day, it's not going to be so relevant. Yes, Max.
Do any of the poskim say that this might not apply to the kind of work that we're doing? It's not so.
No, they say if you're sitting down, crunching numbers, making phone calls, whatever it's going to be, like, this will be included. This will be included here. I don't have in front of me. Probably like this past maybe 4:30 or something. I get you. It's late. It's not time. It's way past midday. It's way past midday.
If you haven't do anything but get ready for Pesach afternoon, I don't know.
Which planet you're on, right? Okay, Taner Ravanan. Yesh Zaraz V'Niskar. There's someone who is like a Zar is assiduous. That's not a word we use. Assiduous. Basically, someone who is like a Zar, someone who's like energetic, does things, and he gets rewarded. Yesh Zaraz V'Niskar. Someone who does work with a lot of energy, and they lose. Yesh Shafal V'Niskar. There's someone who is like kind of lazy, and they get rewarded. Yesh Shafal V'Niskar. There's someone who's lazy and loses out. Okay, what is it referring to? Zaraz V'Niskar. Someone who has zrizos, and they get rewarded. Tavikuli Shabbos V'Lavin Ma'ala Shabbos. It's someone who works the entire week, and doesn't work on Erev Shabbos, right? That's beautiful. You're an energetic person. You do work 6 days, 5 days a week, and then it comes to Erev Shabbos and you stop working. Amazing, okay? Zars v'nifsad, you could be someone who's very energetic and you lose out. Zavi Shavsa, Vav Mav Shabbos, you work the entire week and you work on Erev Shabbos, not good. Meaning, we're talking about working the entire day. Shafal v'niskar, you are lazy and you get rewarded. Dilo Avid Kulei Shabbos, Dilo Avid Kulei Shabbos. Someone who doesn't work the entire week and doesn't work Erev Shabbos, right? Even though it's not being done for like the right reasons, the person just doesn't work. But nonetheless, still, I'd rather, even though it's low lishma, we're going to talk about it, it's low lishma. Not person doesn't have a job or thank God has income from somewhere else. They don't work all week. Fine, still there's still value in not working, even though you're not doing it necessarily for Shabbos. Shafal v'nifsa, you be lazy and lose out. Delo avid kulei Shabbos of avid v'malei Shabbos, not working at all the entire week, but you work on Erev Shabbos. That's like really bad. You're the whole week you chill, and then on Erev Shabbos you work. That's crazy. Okay, Amarava Hani Nashin Mechoza, the women of Mechoza is a wealthy city. Afagav delo avdan avidta v'malei Shabbos, even though they didn't work on Erev Shabbos. Mishum nafan kusa hu, it was because of their delicacy. In other words, they didn't work a lot. They were they weren't very engaged in commerce. It was a very wealthy community, and it was being done because of their, so to speak, delicacy. They don't work on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday either. We call them, so to speak, shafal. Again, lazy sounds a little bit strong. Indolent, I don't know, whatever. Bottom line is they're not doing work, and yet they're rewarded. Okay? Rava brings a contradiction. Hashem, your kindness is up until the heavens. Another pasuk says your kindness is above the heavens. Okay, so is Hashem's kindness above the heavens or to the heavens? Obviously, there's an implication of gradation. So kan ba'osin l'shma, the Gemara says no. When it's above the heavens, it's when a person does it for the sake of Hashem, not for any other reason. And the second one, where it's up to the heavens, is when a person does it not for the real reason. You still get reward, right? Rav Yehuda, famous line from Rav Yehuda Marav, La'olam 50b3, La'olam Yasagad Mitzvah of his mitzvahs, Afa Pish Lo Lishma. A person should engage in study of Torah, doing mitzvahs, even though it's not for its own sake. Shemitoch Shlo Lishma, Ba Lishma, because doing things even for the wrong reason, eventually you'll do it for the right reason. In other words, someone could say, yeah, I'm not so authentic, I'm not doing it for the right reason, I'm doing it because of this reason or that reason, because it's fun, or it's this, or I'm doing it because everyone else is doing it. It's okay. Do it for the wrong reason. Don't do it. The post can qualify. They say it can't be. We're talking to a person we're not talking about a person who's doing it like mamish for the wrong reason. We're not doing it like so that I could boast, so that I could pretend I'm someone I'm not. No, we're talking about a person who's I'm not feeling it. Okay, fine. Do it for the keep on doing it, and eventually you'll get to a point where you'll eventually tap into it. You keep on doing the practice. Eventually it'll become real to you, and you'll do it lishma. Okay, Tanar Banan. We're going to talk about other things which there is Eino Roa Sima Bracha. You don't see a sign of bracha. Hametzapa l'schar ishto verichaim. Person who looks at the earnings of his wife or a mill. Eino Roa Sima Bracha la'olam will never see a sign of blessing. Okay, so what this means, the way the Meiri, who's a big rationalist, understands, doesn't mean literally one's wife. We're going to give a whole list of things where a person has to put a lot of effort in and get very little back. In other words, the Meiri is understanding this Gemara in a very rational way, basically giving us a list of professions where it doesn't make sense. It's like, these are bad professions because you work hard and you make so little, right? Either don't work a lot and make a little, or work very hard and make a lot, but to work a lot and make a little doesn't make any sense, okay? So a person who looks to his wife or a mill, and the Gemara is going to explain. Schar ishto mat kulta. The earnings of his wife means that she goes into the marketplace with a scale for merchants to hire. In other words, you have a scale, and every day she has to run from store to store. Do you want to rent out the scale? Do you want to rent out the scale? It's a lot of work, okay? Rechaya, what does it mean, the mill? Agarta, that you're offering a hand mill for hire, similar type of thing. Aval avda umizabna. But if she goes and sells hand mills, in other words, she is in the production side of things, she makes the hand mill and sells them, there's a big profit line, you'd imagine. The pasuk gives her praise. She makes a cloak and sells it. Again, so it's not about a wife per se. It's not about a woman per se. It's basically saying do professions which have a larger profit line, and don't go into professions you have to work hard and hustle and hustle and hustle, and the profit margin is very, very small. Tanar Banan, we have a brisa. Hamistaker rekanim uvekankanim. Person who sells cane or jars. You won't see bracha. My time at why came in navish afchazayu shaltabu ena. Since their bulk is great, the evil eye affects them. So the way the Meiri understands is that what it means is that you're carrying around to sell jars. Again, you have to sell so many jars to make a little bit of profit, or you sell so many canes, right, to go ahead and to go ahead and get a profit, to have such a bulk. Everyone's looking, oh, this person, I see this person always in business, they're schlepping around all this stuff, they must be a millionaire. No, they're selling a lot of stuff, but when you figure out the profit line, it's so small. It's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. A, it's a low profit line, and B, people are paying attention to you, and they think you're making more, you're not, and therefore not a good idea. Tanar Banan, we have a brisa, top of the second column. Tagre Simta, people who sell in the public alley, similar to before, it's very public. Umegale vehemadaka, or people who raise small animals. Now the issue with small animals was that they would raise them in the city, and the animals would oftentimes go into people's fields and steal a little bit. They take a little grass here, take a little food over here, and people get very frustrated at them. They're going ahead and getting in the way. The kotze lonos tavos, or people who cut down good trees to sell the wood. V'nosem einayim bechelik yafa, or people who always, whenever they get into any business argument, they always demand to get the upper hand. I always want the best deal. They're known to be the one who just like needles to get that. Ein rosim b'racha olam. They don't see a simon bracha. My time. What's the reason? Because people are astonished by them. They see them and basically they think, I'm always see this person, in the public, or this person, I see their animals and I'm afraid their animals going to be stealing from me, or they're always cutting down good trees. I need those trees. What are you doing? Cutting down all the trees. Don't do work that's going to cause people to be frustrated and therefore see you in a bad light. So there are 4 types of coins that never have a sign of blessing. Schar kosvin, the pay of scribes. In other words, don't be a person who gets paid to be a scribe. You'll never get a lot of money, as we're going to see why in a moment. Uschar mitzurgamanin, or the pay of a spokesman. Uschar yisomin. We'll talk about who that is in a moment. The people who have to the people have to oversee the orphans, or income that comes from overseas shipping. Okay, the Gemara is going to elaborate. We understand the pay of a spokesman is not blessed. The typical job, the most public part of the job was on Shabbos. The rabbi would speak, and then he'd have this translator. It wasn't translating; he would just speak loudly. The rabbi would talk like this, and then the person would speak a kind of like project for him. So people would think, oh, he's only getting paid for Shabbos. Now the truth is, there's a way to get paid for Shabbos. You don't get paid just for Shabbos work. You do what we call havla. You get paid for the week. You get paid for the month, and therefore your pay gets mixed in with everything else. But people say, oh, this guy's getting paid for Shabbos, and therefore we'll see it negatively. We won't see a simon bracha. Mosi somanami. Also the money for minor, overseeing, managing minors' estates. They're not able to relinquish their rights, and therefore they're not happy paying the people who are managing their estates because they're like, hey, I don't want this guy doing it. They don't understand, and therefore there's a level of stealing going on. Money from overseas shipping back in the day. Certainly, not every day a miracle will occur. Meaning, back in the day, ship travel was exceptionally dangerous, and you can't depend on the fact that overseas travel is going to be successful. There's so many dangers. My time. What's the reason that when it comes to the what's it called, the schar of work being a scribe, what's the issue? So 50 before Amar Rabbi Shimon Levi fasting the Gemara Esther Ma'arba Tanios Yoshvan Shekenes Gedola, the men of the Great Assembly back in the day, they observed 24 fasts, a close face Svarim Tefillim Mezuzos, regarding the people who write Torah books, Tefillim Mezuzos, Sifrei Torah, Tefillim Mezuzos Shlois Ashu, that they should not become wealthy. Shalom is Ashrin, because if they would become wealthy in doing so, in Kosvin, they would not write it. Right? Isn't that amazing? We want to make sure they're not going to be. We want to have a lot of Sifrei Torah. We want to have a lot of Mezuzos. We want to have a lot of Tefillin. If they're making a lot of money, they'll make one. I'm done. I'm good. No, we want a lot of them, and therefore they daven that they should make a lot of money to incentivize them to do a lot of them, so that we have a lot of mezuzos, tefillin, and Sifrei Torah. Those who write these things, they're vendors, meaning wholesale or whatever. Anyone who engages in heaven's work, to include people who sell tchilas, they do not see a sign of blessing. But if they do their work l'shma, if they show that they're doing it for God's sake, then Rowan, they'll be able to see a sign of blessing. In other words, Hashem is holding back because Hashem wants to make sure they're doing it for that reason. If they do it for that reason, Hashem will watch over them. Okay, one more line. The people of Baisha, a certain city, they would not travel from Tyre to Sidon on Shabbos, even though it's a short distance, because they would be afraid that they get stuck on the way and they would end up being Mechal Shabbos. It was a small travel. The children came before Rabbi Yochanan. Our forefathers, they were able to not go to the market. They were able to stay at home. They were wealthy. We're not wealthy. We don't have this financial cushion. We need to travel. Could we stop their custom? Your parents already accepted upon themselves. As it says, listen to the rebuke of your father. Do not forsake the teaching of your mother. And basically telling them, once your father's had a minhag, once your parents had a minhag, you cannot get out of that minhag. Is that d'oraisa? Is it d'rabanan? Big discussion. But here's one of the places where you see that once our parents take on a minhag, it is not simple for us just to say, okay, well, I'm going to stop giving the minhag. No. Okay, it's a big halachic discussion. And this is one of those sources. He's saying you can't do it. Even though the situation has changed, nonetheless, you have to hold on to their minhag. Have a great day.